Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, we're going to go over signs that means that you're a charismatic man, to which a lot of women might notice. A lot of times, men won't realize that this is a characteristic they have because ladies, more often than not, do not necessarily initiate in comparison to men. And so, even if a lady is noticing how charismatic you are, she might not make direct moves that you might be anticipating as interest. And so, you might be overlooking her interest, even if she is, based on the fact that you're charismatic. And so that's why I'm making this video, to help you guys understand if this is something that you do naturally do, or if it's something that you want to start incorporating within your personality and behavior to kind of help you understand who is attracted to you, who is not, and what's going on around you socially, okay? So the very first one is any man that uses what some people might call charismatic leadership tactics, which can typically inspire loyalty in terms of followers or even a relational context, okay? And the research is going to be in the description box for all of these things. And some research does say that specific verbal and nonverbal behaviors, so this would be even talking in metaphors, storytelling, any sort of moral conviction, any animated voice modification to some extent. These types of behaviors when you're talking can it's a reliable way for people to perceive you as having strong charisma. And also the research does support that to use metaphors to make ideas actually creates a more vivid perspective for individuals to understand. It also expresses confidence in some ways. A lot of gestures and facial expressiveness and dynamic vocal delivery actually really does improve the perspective that you are charismatic. And the research was basically multiple randomized control experiments to show basically, how can I even explain this? So people were actually trained in these tactics, right? And these people were actually much more perceived as charismatic, like significantly more charismatic than individuals who are not trained in these particular techniques or understanding of these techniques. So if you tend to do some of these things, and we're going to talk about more of those specific details throughout the video, each of those variables, but if you do any of those things, likely your delivery comes across very charismatic, okay? And that research was 2011. The next one is any sort of vocal expressiveness, okay? Charismatic individuals, based on research, tend to vary in pitch, in volume, and speaking rate, okay? That means sometimes you're speaking fast, and sometimes you're speaking slowly, depending on what you're talking about, what you're trying to illustrate, and where you want to come across, like who do you want to come across to, right? Research shows that vocal expressiveness actually impacts how people perceive a person comparison to a leader and a follower, okay? So we can see this from political figures. We can see this even individuals who are very popular in the music culture, right? Certain individuals draw a lot of people in simply for the way they talk, their delivery, their speech patterns, but also their vocal expressiveness. We know a lot of individuals from a political standpoint in the United States, a lot of people from our political figures, right? We understand the way a person speaks and their expressiveness so much that people kind of mimic the way some of these people talk, almost in a way like you might be mocking them or making fun of them or whatever it is, but immediately everybody knows who you're trying to mimic because we can see their vocal expressiveness varies so frequently and the rate is very particular. These individuals, the way they speak, we already know who they're talking about because the delivery is so distinct, which creates that leadership particularities, right? And so a lot of people follow these people. Even if some people might be mocking these individuals, we already know who they are, which in the sense is still, we see them differently than we see the general population, okay? So increase and decrease that vocal expressiveness, that fluctuation, okay? Vary pitch, volume, and speaking rate, okay? So what you can do is if you don't feel like you do this, what you can do is avoid monotone delivery, use deliberate pauses to some extent to really understand where your point is coming across, any sort of emotional tone to match your message, okay? And research in 2016 shows that vocal cues, particularly what we're talking about, predicts both charisma in political and business contexts, which is very important, okay? The next one is nonverbal warmth. Any person, if you are a man who you feel like you do some of these behaviors, that would be smiling, open body language, eye contact, this actually increases and enhances likability and perceived charisma, okay? And so what you can do is, if you feel like you're not a man who has some of these characteristics, maintain eye contact, friendly eye contact, not necessarily staring. That can be a little uncomfortable and intimidating to some extent. The next one would be keep shoulders open. So we talk about this on my channel a lot because there's so much research on it. Shoulders back, okay? Instead of closed off stance, okay? Smile genuinely, right? It comes naturally as you're talking, and it's going to show up if you're talking about things that you enjoy. So something that can help a lot of individuals who are naturally more charismatic, and you'll see this, they tend to talk about topics that they are passionate about or they enjoy. And you can hear in their voice the passion, the expressiveness comes naturally. So for you, if you're a man who naturally likes to talk about what you enjoy, you probably already do this. But if you're a man who you feel like you're struggling with this, it's going to be difficult because a lot of you guys might be a little closed off. But sometimes talking about what you like is important. Now, a lot of men feel like if they talk about what they like, it kind of signals weakness, or they feel like they're letting people in and it's too vulnerable. But actually, if you continuously shut people off, you don't come across as charismatic. And if you want to come across as charismatic, it may help a little bit, okay? So research does show that nonverbal warmth does increase interpersonal influence and perceived charisma, which is where a lot of the attraction from women come from. They see that you are very influential, which is leader-like, and a lot of women do like men who are a little bit more dominant in a social setting, okay? That was 2019, the research, okay? The next one is you want to, there's posture. There's a particular posture that can actually increase the perspective of power, presence, and confidence. Now, the reason why I hesitated before this one is because there is a lot of this has mixed evidence. Most research does. This one has a little bit more mixed evidence, and I'm still going to put that in the research, the description box. But I feel like even with the research, if you look at it, the replicated result, particularly for presence, is pretty significant, which is why I put this one in here. However, the hormonal effects, which some of the research talks about, it's kind of debatable. I don't even know if I agree with it, but you can look at it. I'm not going to talk about that part because there's a lot of mixed with that particular part. But the point where the research was replicated, like the results were a little bit more replicated, expansive posture actually does create the feeling of subjective power, presence, and confidence. And then that subjective feeling creates a little bit more of a perspective of you being charismatic from the individuals that this is being subjected upon, not just yourself, but as you transmit those behaviors upon other people. So the best way to put it is when you feel more confident, you feel more powerful based on some of these stances, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail. Of other people interpret you that way. Now, the reason why people said there's like a hormonal effect is some people believe that doing these behaviors reduce certain things, cortisol, other hormones, which I said I'm not going to talk about in too much detail. But in general, if you're standing tall, is what the research said. Standing tall with an open posture before important or impactful interactions can actually create this expansive posture that has the feelings of power and presence to which other people perceive you that way as well. So let's talk about this in a dating context, and then we're going to also talk about in a business or interview type context, okay? If you are getting ready to introduce yourself to a lady and you want to go ahead and ask for her number, before you do so, you want to set up your posture, standing tall with an open posture, and already you're signifying that you perceive yourself as important, which other people will signify you as important as well, which will allow these interactions to become more smoothly or in your favor, okay? Similarly, let's say you're prepping for an interview. Prior to the interview even starting, standing or sitting tall, upright with that open posture can help. That's part of the research that I agree with. So I'm going to talk about that, 2018, if you're curious. Compelling stories. Telling compelling stories actually is a significant part of being charismatic for a man particularly. Narratives actually activate emotional processing, not just for the speaker, but also the listener. It enhances the speaker's impact and connection to listeners. So what ends up happening is a lot of people actually start being more connected to you as a person and believe that you're a powerful figure, okay? So what can you do if you're not an individual who is comfortable telling compelling stories? Frame your explanations through personal relatability or illustrative stories, okay? So The research actually kind of broke it up a little bit. I broke it up further, but you can look at the research in 2011. What I saw the pattern of these stories, and I could be wrong, but this is what I saw, and you can look at it too. And this is what I see with individuals who are charismatic as I observe as a therapist, as I'm studying, as a student. I notice that the story typically starts with a small intro, kind of who they are. They're showing their personality through it, and they then very shortly after they present a challenge. Okay, so maybe there's a story about you going on a hunting trip. So that's the beginning of your story. Then you present some form of a challenge on that hunting trip, whatever that challenge is. Maybe you ran into a bear. I don't know, y'all. I don't go hunting. So some sort of challenge. And then part of the challenge, you don't immediately resolve the challenge. This is what I've seen when observing, and you can see this in the research as well. Once you present the challenge to your listeners, you talk about the struggle, why this is a challenge. For example, with hunting, I don't know much about hunting, but if you're telling me there's a black bear or there's a bear, I don't even know if black bears are dangerous. Like, please, y'all don't quote me. There's a challenge. So you say you're hunting, you're whatever you're doing, and there was a bear. Now you presented the challenge, but you want to explain the struggle for folks who do not understand. So that's up to you guys. I don't know the struggle of if there's a bear in your hunting zone or whatever it is, okay? But you're explaining that. You're explaining why it's a struggle, and then what you do is you stay in that struggle, you bring your particular emotions in that struggle, and then you resolve it to some extent. And that's a structure that I see creates this compelling story, okay? Storytelling does increase persuasion, okay, this is research 2011, emotional engagement, and perceived leadership quality. So if you are a man who is able to tell compelling stories, just being completely honest, a lot of ladies will find you quite attractive just by you doing that, okay? The next one is you want to express your confidence clearly. So the best way to put it is confident delivery, which is clear statements, assertive tone, and steady pacing. This boosts the perception of charisma, even when the message of the content of the message like pretty much is the same. We saw that in research, okay? 2015. Now, this is not always for ladies, okay? Because charisma for women is a little bit different, and it's not as highly like sought out for. Like a lady being charismatic, it can help, but sometimes it can kind of backfire to some extent. I'm not going to talk about that too much, but I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. Basically, the statements that I'm about to talk about that can help you with this delivery. If you're a lady, it might not help as much because it might almost be perceived as, some people might say it's like too masculine. I don't know about that. Like, I really don't know this stuff, but I'm just explaining what some people might say. But if you are a man who wants to have a more confident delivery, you might not want to use disclaimers, right? You might not say, to me, like you might not say something along the lines of, this is what I see, but I don't know, right? Or I'm not sure, right? Those are things that women can do to kind of calm like a man down. I don't know how to explain that, but if a man is struggling with a certain emotion, if a lady says that, it brings him down, right? It de-escalates him, right? So those are de-escalating techniques. Confident individuals who want to come across as more leader-like, they actually don't use as much de-escalating techniques. Rather, they use more confident tones, assertive tones. They make definitive statements when appropriate because it actually allows the women in their life to feel like they can trust him, right? So the trust is the main component. If a woman says, I might be wrong, or this is my perspective, it makes her seem trustworthy to him. But from the flip side, if a man says that, it seems not as trustworthy. I understand that was a little bit of a mouthful. I'm just trying to explain it, okay? Maintaining steady eye contact for both genders. And then research does so. Confidence cues actually does predict charismatic leadership rating and perception, okay? Research in 2015. The next one is you want to practice perspective taking and empathetic communication. This is important, okay? Research in 2005, any man who's actually able to convey empathy and understanding while still maintaining his stance, but still interpreting other people's perspectives, his followers, to modify his own. Research does so that leaders that take perspectives of other actually seem more inspirational and relationally effective in romantic situations, okay? The next one is developing emotional regulation. We talk about this a lot. Any man who's emotionally regulated is able to convey his stance more appropriately to other individuals, okay? He's able to regulate under stress. That means, in general, managing how you're talking in terms of an emotional stance. So let's say something someone said made you upset or angry. Understanding that perceiving yourself as direct or saying, hey, that's not something I'm comfortable with. Maybe we can talk about this another time. That's not a problem. However, getting really angry, slamming things, shouting, putting your hands up in the air, cursing, that might not convey what you're looking for. If anything, someone will say, okay, this guy's really aggressive. I can't talk to him like this, right? But if you say, hey, don't touch me like that, or don't do that to me. I understand I've never told you that before, but please don't do that again. That will make your point across a little bit more palatable, okay? 2005 is the research. So all the research is in the description box. I hope this helps somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.